Hey guys, I'm Lee Props, and today I'm going to be making Solaire of Astora's helmet from the game Dark Souls using some EVA craft foam. I'm making this helmet because yesterday was the 10th anniversary of Dark Souls, and I just wanted to kind of honor it since it's such a great game. The first thing that I did to make the helmet was I went through and glued a circle of craft foam onto a circle of cardboard just to make the base of the top of the helmet so that it would be sturdy and stay pretty straight when I went to go glue it. And then I went through and glued a long strip of foam across the top of that just to make up the main body of the helmet. The sheets I was using weren't long enough, so I ended up using 1.5 of these sheets to get the whole diameter of the helmet covered. After that, I went through and glued on a piece around the visor area to build up a little bit of a dimension around the perimeter of it. And then I went through and glued on the eye part. This is just a little raised detail that I put on the front of it just so I know where to cut the eye holes out of. And then I went through and cut out the eye hole area, just making it a little bit wider than I normally would, just so I can go through and fill in the seams with a piece of foam. I then went through and cut a circle out of a piece of foam, and then went through and fit that piece of foam that I cut the circle out of onto the helmet. I did cut it in kind of an elliptical shape so that it could bend and have room to bend, since if you cut a hole in something flat, it won't fit over if you bend it. And this is just to make kind of that shoulder guard armor part that Solaire's helmet has. And after getting the placement of that right, I went through and hot glued it along that seam. It's okay if the line is a little messy because that seam's going to get covered up with some detail pieces. After getting the front and back glued on, I went through and trimmed it. The front of the neck guard part is a little bit thinner, so I made sure to trim it so that the sides of it were wider than it was thick. And a really simple way for getting your thing near is just to bend the part. For those detail parts that go all along the neck guard, I just went through and cut about 24 or so of those out, and then I went through and glued them all along the neck guard, just spacing them about as evenly as I could. I did end up getting one off, so it's not even all around the whole neck, but I'm fine with that. It looks good enough from a distance. I made the nose bridge part by just gluing a piece of foam in kind of a dented shape and then gluing that on place so that it's kind of friction held in place. And then to make the top kind of angled a little bit, I went through and cut a dart out of that circle that I cut out earlier and went through and glued that together, and then glued it on the top of the helmet just using some hot glue that I threw on earlier so that it would kind of harden as I put the foam on. And then I went through and trimmed the outside of that with some scissors just to make it flush. I then went through and filled in all of these seams with some flexible spackle. I've been testing this out on a few helmets that I've modified. I repainted my Boba Fett helmet just because I didn't like how it turned out and the seams were bad and everything, so I tested some of this out to try to get the seams down, and it works pretty well. You just apply it like you do any other spackling, and then you go through and you can water it down a little bit with water just to get it smooth, and then you go down and sand it with some fine grit or medium grit sandpaper just to get it nice and smooth after it's dried for a couple of days. And I just applied this all with this spackling knife that I bought just so that I don't have to sand it as much, but you guys could definitely use your fingers or a piece of cardboard or something. Then you can go through and battle damage it using a soldering iron or a wood burner and just carving in a bunch of lines and stuff just to represent scars and dents and stuff that this helmet might have accumulated. I went a little heavy on the battle damage just because this was one of my first times trying it out, and I did go a little heavy on it, but I rather like how it looks, especially with how I painted it. I really think it kind of brings out the battle damage, though it's not quite accurate to the game, so I mean, go a little lighter if you want it to be more accurate to the game. I also used a Dremel to go through and give it a little bit of a few divots around the helmet And I did that to make the dent on my Boba Fett helmet as well, so you guys might have noticed that technique. And then went through and sealed the whole helmet using some gloss Mod Podge. I just went through and mixed a little bit of water into this, and then went through and dabbed it on with a sponge brush just to give it a little bit of a texture, just so that the helmet's not all smooth. I kind of wanted to give this a pretty worn look, as all of the battle damage implies. And I just dabbled this on, and this took about 10 minutes to apply, and then I let it dry for about half an hour, and then I went through and did another layer just to make sure that everything was all sealed. I also did a little bit of the inside of the helmet just so that you didn't see any of the foam underneath or through the helmet. Then I went through and painted the whole helmet with some gloss black spray paint, and this is just to give the next coat of metallic paint a nice metallic look. I mixed in some graphite powder into this metallic paint I'm using just to give it a really nice shine, and I just dabbed this all over the helmet, kind of like I did for the Mod Podge. This kind of gives it a dry brushed effect look, and it just leaves all of the deep black areas black, kind of negating the effect of a black wash, just because it gives it a nice weathered look. I did do a mild brown wash over this helmet, just going over all of the seam lines with some brown acrylic paint, and then wiping that away just to give it kind of a rusted look, like some of these small areas and grooves had gotten rusted over time. Like I said, I wasn't trying to match the weathering details that this helmet has in the game. I was kind of going with my own flow, and it did end up pretty heavily weathered, but like I said before, I'm fine with that. And overall, I really like how this helmet turned out. It fits on my head pretty well. I did have to modify it a little bit in the beginning, but I didn't film that part, so that's fine. And yeah, I really like how the weathering turned out. Like I said, it is overly weathered, but I really like how that looks, and I will definitely be making more helmets to this style. Since I made this for Dark Souls 10th anniversary, you guys should totally go play that game. It's an awesome game, and I've had a ton of fun playing it over the years. If you guys don't mind checking out my Patreon, although I didn't use any black paint in this build, I use it in a ton of my other builds, and my Patreon Matthew actually pays for that, so thank you, Matthew. Be sure to like and subscribe, and let me know what you guys want me to make. This helmet was a requested build, I'm not sure by who, but that's one of the reasons I made that. So definitely be sure to let me know what you guys want me to make, and I'll see you guys next vid. Happy crafting. Bye.